On the evening of February 1st, 2017, in a private dining room of a restaurant in Shanghai's Hongkou district, China, the 60th birthday celebration for Mr. Yang had been meticulously prepared. Friends and relatives had gathered from all over, laughter and conversation filling the elegantly decorated room. Yet amid this warm atmosphere of reunion, something was clearly wrong. The seats of honor and several chairs beside them remained empty. These were the places specially arranged for his daughter Yang Leiping, son-in-law Zhu Xiaodong, and the in-laws from the groom's side. The young couple had been married for less than a year. Xiaodong was 29 that year, while Leiping was an elementary school Chinese language teacher. They were close in age, and their life together seemed to be entering its sweetest phase. Under normal circumstances, even if something prevented them from attending, they would have at least called or texted the family beforehand, especially for such an important occasion as her father's milestone birthday. What made everyone even more anxious was that this absence was completely unexpected. It wasn't just the young couple who failed to show up. Even Xiaodong's parents, who had confirmed their attendance in their most recent conversation, were nowhere to be found. Xiaodong's mother had even gone out of her way to prepare a meaningful gift for her in-law's birthday celebration. Because of these firm promises, the restaurant had carefully arranged enough seating for both families. Yet when the banquet began, those 4 chairs remained conspicuously empty. In fact, from that very afternoon, before the guests started arriving, the Yang family had sensed something was wrong when they discovered they couldn't reach their daughter or son-in-law no matter what they tried. Phone calls went unanswered. One number showed as disconnected, the other went straight to voicemail. WeChat messages sent into the void sank like stones thrown into a deep ocean. As the banquet officially began, guests' eyes occasionally drifted toward the empty seats, accompanied by curious questions tinged with concern. Facing the barrage of inquiries from friends and relatives, Mrs. Yang, Leiping's mother, could only force an awkward smile, stammering, "It's probably just traffic. You know how Shanghai is at this hour." Or, maybe something came up suddenly for the two of them. But behind her forced composure, unease had quietly crept in and begun to spread. It wasn't until around 6 p.m. that evening that Mrs. Yang's phone suddenly rang. On the other end was Xiaodong's mother, but her voice had lost its usual warmth, replaced by urgency and heaviness. She didn't explain much, simply saying that the Yang family needed to come to the police station immediately, then dropped a chilling, vague statement. "Leiping may no longer be with us." The birthday banquet came to an abrupt halt. Family members hurriedly took the elderly man home first, trying not to shock him too much. The rest immediately rushed to the Guangzhong Road police station in Hongkou district. On the way there, everyone still clung to a shred of hope, reassuring themselves that perhaps it was just a traffic accident or some incident that wasn't too serious. Anything other than the worst possibility they dared not contemplate. But when they set foot in the police station and saw the grave expressions on the officers' faces, all hope collapsed. The official announcement was delivered. Yang Leiping was dead, and the time of death was estimated to be approximately 3 months earlier. As it turned out, that same afternoon, while the Yang family was anxiously awaiting news from their daughter, another development had been quietly unfolding. Xiaodong had proactively contacted his mother, asking her to come immediately to the couple's apartment, Unit 404 in the Shangye Yikun residential complex in Hongkou district. When Xiaodong's parents rushed to the scene, they could never have imagined what awaited them. Right there in that small apartment, Xiaodong confessed to them a horrifying truth. Leiping's death was directly connected to him. After a moment of shock and likely panic, his parents made the decision to accompany their son to the Hongkou District Public Security Bureau. Right in front of the station entrance, Xiaodong dialed 110 himself to turn himself in. Upon receiving the report, police immediately conducted a search of Unit 404. This newlywed apartment had a usable area of only about 375 square feet, a suffocatingly cramped layout. At first glance, the room appeared to have been tidied up, but one thing immediately caught the investigators' attention. The living room area near the balcony was lined with more than a dozen glass terrariums arranged neatly in rows, inside of which snakes, lizards, and other cold-blooded reptiles were being carefully maintained. However, the discovery that truly gave the case its horrifying turn was in the corner of the balcony. A large freezer had been placed there, and inside was Leiping's body. Beyond the freezer containing the body, the scene revealed other important evidence. A discarded mattress, a newly installed surveillance camera, with its lens pointed directly at the balcony area where the freezer sat, and numerous traces indicating the apartment had been carefully cleaned and rearranged. All these details suggested this was not a spontaneous act of impulse, but rather a calculated concealment with clear intent. This raised a chilling question. If Leiping had been killed 3 months earlier, then throughout those 90-plus agonizing days, why hadn't her family noticed anything? Why had no one grown suspicious? Why did everyone still believe she was living normally? To find the answer, we need to turn back time and examine this marriage from the beginning. A relationship that started with beautiful promises, but ultimately ended in a tragedy no one could have foreseen. Yang Leiping was a Shanghai native through and through, born and raised in this bustling metropolis. She had delicate features and spoke softly, easily making a good impression on those she met. Whenever family members mentioned her, they all used the same words: well-behaved, never causing her parents worry, self-disciplined. During her school years, her academic performance was consistently stable, if not outstanding. Her daily habits were also very regular and punctual, never needing anyone to remind her, the kind of child every parent dreams of having. Leiping's upbringing was somewhat different from other children's. When she was young, she spent more time living with her maternal grandmother than with her parents. In 4th grade, when her parents moved into a resettlement housing unit, she transferred to a nearby elementary school to be closer to the family. However, when she entered middle school, she moved back to live with her grandmother. Throughout those years, her life was split in two, staying at her grandmother's house on weekdays for convenience of schooling, then returning to her parents' home on weekends, shuttling back and forth until it became routine. Friends and relatives recalled that she never became rebellious or resentful because of living away from her parents or the inconvenience of constant travel. On the contrary, these circumstances seemed to make her even more quiet and mature beyond her years, more independent than children her age, always arranging her own affairs properly without needing reminders. Later, she successfully passed the entrance exam for the Chinese language department at Shanghai Normal University. After graduation, she became a Chinese language teacher at an elementary school, a respectable and stable job that perfectly suited the consistent personality and lifestyle she had maintained throughout the years. Her parents even learned about her job placement through the principal at a parent meeting. That was just how Leiping was, quietly accomplishing things before casually mentioning them to the family. In the eyes of colleagues and acquaintances, Leiping was someone who worked conscientiously and responsibly, treated everyone gently and courteously, didn't like noise, and never competed for attention or recognition. Xiaodong's life trajectory was completely different, as if the two came from entirely separate worlds. Xiaodong was also born in 1987, also a Shanghai native, from an ordinary family without much money. But more important than material circumstances was the family atmosphere. It was far from healthy. His parents fought constantly, their arguments stretching throughout his childhood. By the time Xiaodong turned 10, that broken marriage officially ended in divorce papers. He was assigned to live with his mother. In their single-parent household, his mother was busy making ends meet, leaving less time and energy for supervising her child. Without proper oversight, Xiaodong soon became addicted to video games, increasingly lost in virtual worlds. His studies declined accordingly without any breaks. The result was that upon graduating from middle school, he didn't have high enough scores to get into any high school, and had to settle for Nanhu Vocational School, ultimately earning only a vocational certificate. From age 19 onward, Xiaodong drifted between jobs at various shopping centers, sometimes as a sales clerk, other times as a display merchandiser. His income was meager, but he placed extreme importance on appearances and outward image. Xiaodong knew how to dress well, always immaculate from hair to clothes, and particularly knew how to position himself in the most prominent spot during any social occasion. What truly pushed his ability to perform to its peak was a talent competition in 2007. That year, Xiaodong had just turned 20 and decided to register for the program Wo Xing Wo Xiu, loosely translated as I Shine My Way, organized by Dragon Television. At that time, singing and modeling competitions were extremely popular in China, and the show was skilled at building images for its contestants. In promotional materials and introductions that year, the keyword repeatedly used to describe him was pure, a handsome face, innocent eyes, refined and harmonious features. However, the competition didn't bring Xiaodong high rankings or lucrative contracts. He was eliminated fairly early, never making it to the national finals. But that brief experience taught him a valuable lesson in a different sense, that as long as his appearance was eye-catching enough, his words sweet enough, and he could read the room and seize opportunities, he could quickly gain goodwill, attention, and even tangible benefits in a short time. From then on, whether working in sales or hanging around bars and nightclubs, whether making friends or pursuing women, Xiaodong thoroughly applied this formula. He invested heavily in his outward appearance, was skilled at making first impressions, and reacted nimbly in every situation. But that was where it stopped. Building anything long-term or lasting, not his strength. Returning to his work life, Xiaodong's career never improved as he continued jumping between positions at various shopping center counters. Yet the way he spent money and lived increasingly resembled someone well off, frequenting bars and nightclubs like clockwork, wearing only designer clothes, always posting glamorous photos on social media. The money he earned was limited, but his image had to be maintained at all costs. Leiping and Xiaodong first met at a friend's gathering sometime around 2012. Among the crowd that day, Xiaodong stood out noticeably with his bright appearance, well-groomed outfit, and lively, charming conversation style. He approached Leiping in a completely natural, unforced manner. For a girl like Leiping, accustomed only to interacting with classmates and colleagues in a fairly simple environment, someone like Xiaodong was genuinely novel. He knew how to make conversation, knew how to offer clever compliments at just the right moments, knew how to make the atmosphere relaxed and enjoyable, causing the person across from him to unknowingly lower their guard. The relationship between the two had no dramatic or sensational beginning. It flowed like water and drifted like clouds, naturally drawing them closer together following their mutual attraction. But just as their feelings were gradually warming up, Xiaodong suddenly vanished without a word of explanation. Phone calls went unanswered, messages received no reply, as if he had evaporated from the face of the earth. Leiping anxiously asked around everywhere, even going so far as to visit Xiaodong's mother's home to inquire, but received no clear answers. Just like that, she waited in confusion and hopelessness for an entire year. That year of Xiaodong's disappearance wasn't actually a meaningless void. During that time, he was in Tibet with a woman surnamed Li. Ms. Li came from a wealthy background and was willing to finance their extended trip together. They stayed on the plateau for quite a while, until the relationship fell apart. The reason was that Ms. Li gradually noticed some extreme tendencies in Xiaodong's personality that were cause for concern. She feared that if she continued staying with him, something bad could happen at any moment. In the end, she had to contact Xiaodong's father to bring him back to Shanghai. A year later, Xiaodong suddenly reappeared before Leiping as if nothing had happened. He brought with him a story that sounded like something from a movie, that he had once been diagnosed with a serious brain disease, didn't want to become a burden to anyone, and so quietly went to Tibet alone to find a remote place to wait for his final days. Then he continued the tale, as if by some miracle, his condition spontaneously improved. Follow-up tests showed he was completely healthy, and so he returned to find Leiping. The story was full of holes, lacking logic even at first listen. But Leiping, perhaps because she had waited too long, perhaps because she wanted to believe in something good, chose to accept that explanation. On October 25, 2013, the two officially confirmed their romantic relationship. By Chinese New Year 2015, Leiping decided to bring Xiaodong home to meet her family. The meeting didn't go as smoothly as she had hoped. Her grandmother disliked her future son-in-law from the very first glance. The elderly woman didn't hesitate to say directly that Xiaodong doesn't look like someone who would settle down and work hard. Leiping's parents also couldn't hide their concern. They sensed something wasn't right about this man. But faced with their daughter's determination, they eventually relented. On December 31st, 2015, the very last day of the year, Leiping and Xiaodong officially registered their marriage. Because the Zhu family's financial situation wasn't comfortable, Leiping's parents contributed 100,000 yuan, approximately 14,000 US dollars, from savings they had carefully accumulated over the years to help the young couple renovate their newlywed apartment. Unit 404 in the Shangye Yikun complex in Hongkou district. Before their daughter left for her husband's home, they repeatedly reminded Leiping to keep some money aside for emergencies so she'd have something to fall back on when needed. On May 26, 2016, Leiping officially moved into the new apartment after the wedding. The place measured only about 375 square feet, so cramped that every piece of furniture had to be carefully calculated. Yet looking at the living room, what should have been the shared space for husband and wife, more than half the area had been taken over by dozens of temperature and humidity-controlled glass terrariums lined up along the balcony. Xiaodong's reptile collection that he doted on and cared for daily. As for Leiping, she only carved out a small, modest corner for herself, keeping a tiny hamster. Just 2 days after moving into the new home, on May 28, 2016, the wedding ceremony was held. The banquet was extremely simple, with only 7 tables for relatives from both families. Leiping, with her frugal nature and not wanting to create additional financial burden, had cut almost all the elaborate rituals. No magnificent wedding dress, no grand procession of cars to pick up the bride, no flashy performances. She appeared in a simple white lace top paired with ripped jeans, face bare without makeup. In contrast, Xiaodong stood beside her in a dapper suit, hair neatly styled, projecting an image of sophistication before the guests. Outsiders looking in thought they were a perfectly complementary couple, a capable, practical wife and a suave, handsome husband. But marriage isn't just about what's displayed before a crowd. Real life begins when the door of that 375 square foot apartment closes. Where does the money come from to cover expenses? How are costs divided? Who yields to whom in daily friction? Who bears which responsibilities? These questions can't be answered with a glamorous appearance or sweet words. And so 2016, which seemed like the beautiful beginning of married life, was actually when conflicts began to quietly accumulate. If one only listened to what Leiping told her parents, this marriage sounded passable. She said Xiaodong liked cleanliness and tidiness, knew how to cook, was filial to his parents, and treated his wife reasonably well. On the husband's side, Xiaodong's mother also always appeared agreeable, often saying that although the family circumstances were modest, if her daughter-in-law needed anything, she should just speak up, and they would do what they could. But the problem was that Leiping was never the type to ask for things or make demands. She was frugal to the point of being harsh with herself, buying whichever appliance was cheaper, continuing to use things even after they broke for as long as possible. Often, watching how she lived, one got the sense she was straining herself to maintain stability at all costs. In her mind, she probably always thought, ask for a little less, tolerate a little more, avoid whatever conflicts can be avoided. Do that and the marriage will be fine. As for Xiaodong, even before the marriage, his romantic history had never been clean or clear-cut. His past always left traces that were hard to erase, both literally and figuratively. Right there on his body, on the inside of his arm, a tattoo from a previous relationship was still clearly visible. The eternal vow, love someone forever, accompanied by a specific date. Leiping had brought this up multiple times before the wedding, asking him to have it removed or covered up. But Xiaodong kept promising and then procrastinating, never actually doing it. That tattoo remained, like a thorn embedded between them, reminding Leiping that she might not be the only one in his heart. Looking back at the timeline, everything becomes disturbingly clear. On October 25, 2013, Xiaodong and Leiping officially confirmed their romantic relationship. Yet just a year later, in October 2014, someone spotted Xiaodong dressed impeccably, walking alongside a woman surnamed Li to attend a wedding with the demeanor of a dating couple. This meant that even as his relationship with Leiping was progressing step by step, on the other side, Xiaodong had no intention of making a clean break with the past or other relationships. He was like someone deliberately positioning himself at the center of multiple relationships simultaneously, maintaining deliberate ambiguity, intentionally prolonging overlapping emotional entanglements, refusing to decisively cut off any of them. And when the two officially entered marriage, this problem not only didn't stop, on the contrary, it became even more blatant and obvious, as if the curtain that had been concealing things all along was gradually being pulled aside. Xiaodong controlled Leiping's social circle in an extremely tight, almost suffocating manner. Whenever Leiping wanted to meet friends on her own, even just for casual coffee dates or get-togethers, Xiaodong would show his displeasure, his expression souring and making the atmosphere at home tense. If Leiping so much as had a normal conversation with any man, even just a colleague or old classmate, Xiaodong became exponentially more sensitive. Forcing Leiping to delete WeChat contacts or phone numbers wasn't a once or twice occurrence. It had become a repeating pattern, a controlling habit that Xiaodong imposed on his wife's life as if it were perfectly natural. Leiping even once posted on Weibo, essentially saying that female friends were fine, but male friends always risked being deleted from her contact list at any moment. Even Weibo itself could become a battlefield. She emphasized that this was not a drill, but a real war, a silent and persistent one. Looking back at those words now, people realize it was like a cry for help disguised under a layer of humor, as if Leiping was trying to tell the outside world that she was being watched at every step, controlled in every relationship. But the most bitterly ironic thing about this entire story is that while Xiaodong guarded his wife so closely, controlling her relationships with such uncompromising strictness, he himself showed absolutely no restraint whatsoever on the outside. On December 31st, 2015, Leiping and Xiaodong officially registered their marriage. Yet during the period immediately before and after they received that marriage certificate, Xiaodong was maintaining an ambiguous and illicit relationship with a woman he had known from before the marriage. This wasn't a momentary lapse, not just one or two brief encounters before ending. It was a relationship that continued uninterrupted for more than half a year. This meant that from the very moment Leiping's marriage officially began, Xiaodong already had someone else on the outside, having betrayed his marriage vows before their life as husband and wife had truly even started. By June 2016, this extramarital relationship was finally discovered by Leiping. Everything immediately exploded. That day, cornered with no way out, Xiaodong dropped to his knees before his wife, begging for her forgiveness with an expression full of remorse and repentance. He wrote a pledge right then and there, promising that from now on there would only be her, promising never to text or contact any other woman again, saying she could check his phone every day and examine his messages anytime she wanted. Those words sounded so sincere, so determined. But that pledge written in black ink on white paper had no power to actually make Xiaodong stop. It was merely a tool to soothe the immediate anger. And sure enough, when the storm gradually subsided, when Leiping began to calm down and gave him a chance to start over, Xiaodong quietly returned to his old trajectory. By July 2017, Xiaodong once again crossed every moral boundary when he began a relationship with a female college student attending a university in Shanghai. But what was even more brazen was that on August 1st, 2017, Xiaodong told this young woman that he was divorced, completely free and unattached. He draped himself in the guise of a single man to establish what he called an official romantic relationship with her. In other words, Xiaodong was simultaneously living two completely separate parallel lives. On one side, in that little 375-square-foot home, he maintained the title and role of a husband. On the other side, in the outside world, he carried the identity of a free, single man immersed in a new romance with a young woman who had no idea of the truth. And so, the conflicts in this marriage silently accumulated layer by layer, piling up like invisible stones growing heavier and heavier. From the outside, the shell of the relationship seemed intact, still the image of a normal young married couple like any other. But inside, the foundation had been shaking for a long time. And when the day came that things could no longer hold, the collapse usually didn't come from a loud, violent wave that everyone could see from afar. It came the moment the word divorce was officially put on the table for the first time. According to Xiaodong's later testimony to police on August 25, 2016, he and Leiping had gone together to the Civil Affairs Office to file for divorce. Xiaodong believed this decision stemmed mainly from two reasons. First, his various affairs had been successively exposed, making it no longer possible for him to smooth things over with sweet talk as before. Second, conflicts over money had become increasingly apparent. Renovation costs and daily expenses that Leiping had previously shouldered were something she no longer wanted to bear alone. She was now demanding he share the burden. These issues caused the couple to argue more and more frequently. In his testimony, Xiaodong repeatedly mentioned phrases like too much pressure, endless arguments, can't go on living like this. That's why, he said, he had developed the idea of divorce. As for Leiping, according to Xiaodong, she adamantly refused to agree to end this marriage. The divorce attempt stalled at this point. On the surface, the two stopped the proceedings, but the conflicts didn't actually disappear. Just 2 days after the failed divorce attempt, around 2 a.m. on August 27, 2016, Xiaodong went on an e-commerce platform and ordered several books with content related to death. Later, someone noticed that one book titled The Autopsy Table mentioned a particular method, using low temperatures for preservation, then waiting until the weather warmed up to process the body, in order to interfere with determining the time of death and increase the difficulty of investigation. This detail was later believed to have served as reference material for what Xiaodong would do next. From late August to early September, Xiaodong began constructing a new story that sounded very complete. He suddenly told Leiping that he was about to be promoted and transferred to Hong Kong for work with a monthly salary of 20,000 yuan, about $2,800. He wanted Leiping to come with him and even suggested she quit her job to prepare for their new life. But the reality was that at that time, Xiaodong was just a display merchandiser at a department store earning just over 5,000 yuan, $700 a month, with no promotion plans or transfer arrangements whatsoever. The Hong Kong story was full of obvious holes, yet Leiping still believed it. On September 14, 2016, Leiping went to her school with Xiaodong to submit her resignation. The principal tried to dissuade her multiple times, but Leiping remained firm, saying she had already made up her mind. On September 19th, Leiping posted on WeChat moments showing off a lavish meal, sharing that her husband had suddenly been treating her very well, which made her both touched and uneasy. Notably, she hid this post from all relatives, including her parents. Afterward, Xiaodong bought Leiping a new phone, then ordered a large freezer under the pretense of storing food for his pets, placing it on the balcony of Unit 404. The apartment was only 375 square feet and already had a refrigerator, so this freezer looked very out of place, but Leiping didn't suspect anything at the time. Xiaodong even got rid of 2 pythons he had kept for years to make room. On the surface, the marriage seemed to be warming up. Xiaodong appeared caring, attentive, and painted a picture of their shared future. Leiping believed her husband had changed, but this improvement came too quickly and too unusually, like an underground current silently rising, signaling that the turning point of tragedy was approaching. In later interrogations, Xiaodong mentioned the couple's trip to Hangzhou. According to his testimony, around October 15th, the couple went on a trip to Hangzhou together. This was also the last time outsiders saw them appear together in public. Xiaodong said that during the trip, the two got into arguments over trivial matters, like which hotel to book and how to arrange the itinerary. When they returned to Shanghai, the conflicts didn't die down, but continued to escalate. The more they argued, the worse it got, and the atmosphere in the small home was constantly tense. According to his testimony, on the morning of October 18th, yet another argument erupted. Xiaodong said that at that moment, he just wanted Leiping to stop talking, to stop continuing. In a moment of losing emotional control, he pressed down on her airway continuously for about 5 minutes. When he came to and realized what had happened, Leiping was no longer breathing. What Xiaodong did next wasn't to call for help, nor to call emergency services or the police. It was to move Leiping's body into the freezer that had been placed on the balcony beforehand. In his statements to police, he repeatedly emphasized that everything was just impulsive, that he didn't think about the consequences. But looking at how he handled everything afterward, it's hard to believe this was simply the action of someone who lost control in a moment. When Leiping was discovered, her body was in a frozen state, wrapped in a comforter on the outside, with plastic sheeting and various frozen foods placed on top, all arranged to make the freezer look like it was being normally used to store food. More notably, on the very evening of the incident, Xiaodong went online and ordered a surveillance camera system. After installation, the lens was pointed directly at the balcony area where the freezer sat. If anyone approached, his phone would receive an immediate notification. At the same time, he took the mattress downstairs and threw it in the garbage room of the residential complex. Throughout the apartment, there were signs that everything had been thoroughly cleaned. Around 10 a.m. on October 17, 2016, Xiaodong transferred 30,000 yuan, about 4,200 USD, from Leiping's Alipay account to his own, then transferred another 40,000 plus yuan, 5,600 plus USD from her salary card. Initially, when reporting to police, Xiaodong said the money transfer was done after the incident. But when it came to trial, he changed his testimony, speaking very vaguely about the crucial timestamps. His testimony kept wavering back and forth on these key details, making it hard to believe this was simply a case of momentarily losing emotional control. The strangest thing was that from that day forward, Xiaodong didn't flee or disappear. He chose to maintain everything as normal. He began using Leiping's WeChat account to communicate with her relatives and friends, making everyone believe Leiping was still alive, just busy with work or traveling and unable to easily stay in touch. These communications all followed a fixed pattern. Only text messages were sent, never voice messages or phone calls. Whenever anyone asked why they couldn't reach her by phone, he always gave the same explanation. The phone's voice calling function was broken. The other end couldn't hear anything, so they could only communicate via text. Because of this, in the eyes of the Yang family, everything seemed to be proceeding normally, with days passing as if nothing had happened. First, on October 31st, Halloween, Xiaodong directly used Leiping's account to post photos with Disney plush toys, sending a very clear message. She was out having fun, everything was normal. On November 7th, Leiping's mother received a WeChat message from Leiping, saying she wanted to travel with Xiaodong for her birthday, mentioning specific destinations like Hokkaido and Jeju Island, and promising to treat the whole family to dinner for Xiaodong's birthday. Yet the next day, when the mother wanted to call, Leiping refused to answer, only replying by text. On November 21st, the Yang family's cat of over 10 years passed away. When the mother sent the news, Leiping immediately responded with a string of crying emojis, adding, "I'm out of town." The reaction was so typical of their daughter that it only made the family feel more reassured. On the night of December 2nd, Leiping's cousin happened to run into Xiaodong on the street and asked, "Where's Leiping?" Xiaodong answered very naturally, "She's at home. I just got off work." The consistency between this direct statement and the previous text messages continued to maintain the illusion that Leiping was still alive. Most ironically, on December 31st, their first wedding anniversary, Xiaodong even used Leiping's identity to say she wanted a private celebration with her husband. But according to another lead, that very day, Xiaodong was actually at a hotel celebrating New Year's Eve with another woman. Xiaodong wasn't simply going through the motions. He posted on social media to create fake travel traces, only replied via text while never answering calls, and used very ordinary family-oriented details to make relatives believe Leiping was just busy or traveling. Just like that, the Yang family was led along by this fabricated story for 105 straight days, and by the time they realized something was wrong, it was far too late. On November 29th, 2017, this murdered wife hidden in freezer case that shocked public opinion was brought to open trial at Shanghai No. 2 Intermediate People's Court. On August 23, 2018, the first instance verdict was announced. The court determined that Xiaodong had committed intentional homicide, had deliberately concealed the body for an extended period after the crime, continuously deceived the victim's relatives, and showed no genuine remorse. In accordance with the law, the court sentenced Xiaodong to death and stripped him of political rights for life. Immediately after the verdict was announced, Xiaodong declared his intention to appeal. On July 5, 2019, the Shanghai High People's Court announced the appellate verdict, upholding the original sentence. The court clearly stated that Xiaodong's actions far exceeded the scope of a marital dispute that had suddenly erupted, and therefore all requests for reduced sentencing were rejected. On June 4, 2020, the Supreme People's Court officially approved the death sentence and issued the execution order. Shanghai No. 2 Intermediate People's Court carried out the execution in accordance with legal procedures. However, just when it seemed the case had closed and the family could begin to heal, about a month after the incident was exposed, debt collection calls began flooding Mr. Yang's phone. Only then did the family discover that the nightmare wasn't truly over. Investigation confirmed that after committing the crime, Xiaodong had continued using Leiping's credit cards to make purchases totaling over 100,000 yuan, about $14,000. Not stopping there, he also borrowed money in her name across multiple online lending platforms, totaling over 200,000 yuan, $28,000. He used minimum payments each month to extend the debt chain, concealing everything until his arrest, when the whole thing finally came to light. For the Yang family, what they lost wasn't just their daughter's life. Her identity, her credit, even her honor after death continued to be exploited. The entire judicial process took nearly 3 years. But if we pull the lens back to the marriage itself, this relationship was shockingly brief. The two registered their marriage on December 31, 2015. The crime occurred on October 18, 2016. In between was only about 9 months, less than a year. When someone relies on an eye-catching appearance, clever speaking skills, and the ability to create romantic moments full of ceremony, quickly drawing you close and making you feel special and treasured, are you willing to slow down a bit to observe? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.